Please welcome to the stage Lily Gungus, Chief Technology Officer for the Kapor Foundation, Joshua Elder, Vice President and Head of Grant Making for the Siegel Family Endowment, Anaya Williams, Director of Programs for Omidyar Network, and Carlos Ignacio Zavala, Vice President of Whiteboard Advisors.
Well, hello everybody. Welcome, welcome. I know we have a lot to discuss today. We only have 20 minutes. So that's the biggest challenge for me than this heat right now. Well, you all can look at our backgrounds, I think, and we'll always be around here. So if you want to chat in terms of what we do a little bit more in this space, but I want to just start getting started with the big topic at hand, right? Philanthropy is quickly moving right now in this space, specifically, after the federal government and removing a lot of, federal grants. So I think I want to just start with some context from the three of you. Where are we right now in philanthropy? Why are we here? What's going on? Ania, I'd love to get started with you.
Yeah. I think one thing that is worth calling out is we think about like philanthropy as some magical sort of counterweight to everything that happens in what private markets do, where we are really, as an entire industry, like a much small amount of money compared to trillions of dollars. But definitely here trying to make an impact, trying to change the world, all of those things. I think one of the things that we're seeing right now in this particular moment in time is where philanthropies, foundations have had some understanding and knowledge of what our peers and our counterparts have been doing. There's definitely starting to be a coalescence and a coming together, and us really trying to figure out where we have shared ideas, shared missions, and trying to make a sum that's bigger than each of our separate parts.
Josh?
Yeah, I mean, I think to piggyback off of that about philanthropy being this black box is philanthropy just showing up, right? Like being on the stage in places like this to demystify what do we actually do and where is the money going? And I think, especially given all of the issues we've experienced with federal funding and the cuts that are happening, realizing that philanthropy cannot completely fill the gap, but there are roles that we can play. And I think one of the things that we're really interested in, and there's a growing movement of foundations supporting, is how can philanthropy act as society's risk capital? When you think about the ROI that we are looking for from traditional grant making, it really is just trying to have a positive impact on society. So how can we support innovative ideas and leaders that oftentimes aren't ready necessarily to go to market to really help them show and develop proof points and show what scale could look like? Hopefully then to get either government, other kind of like market driven functions to support them and show what's possible. And I think that's what you're seeing philanthropy trying to step up and do. We have a long way to go, but it is exciting that people are trying to move the needle to make sure we can have that impact on society that's needed, especially in the emerging technology sector.
I mean, everything that's been said, I would definitely say plus one, especially in the de-risking. I think at the moments that we're in right now, Carlos, as you shared, we're not in normal times, right? So we can't be walking around like it's business as usual. We're in probably one of the most dangerous times that we've seen, but this is our moment, and I do think that especially with philanthropy, we have an increased responsibility, in my opinion, to make sure that we are acting and moving to meet the moment. And as an example, that de-risking, that investing, going and doubling down on inclusion. For us at the Kapor Foundation, we center equity and technology. So inclusion drives innovation, and we believe in that. And we also believe that we have to make sure that we're funding systems of systems, but we can't do that alone. As you mentioned, where one foundation is a tiny bit in the bigger picture of the trillions of dollars, but together we can definitely mobilize more. And I would say that an example in California, where we have over 3,000 plus foundations, regional foundations, holding billions of dollars, but they haven't moved their money towards technology inclusion yet. And I think that that's the opportunity of the moment, is to make sure that we're calling in a lot of these other foundations that maybe perhaps have been invested or helped de-risk some of these spaces, to do it now and to do it with urgency.
Now, I think going into that, let's talk AI, right? And let's talk about how we're creating and deploying AI responsibly. I'd love to hear from the three of you how your organizations are approaching this right now. I think we're at a critical point where AI is changing almost every day. There are other actors. So I'd love to hear from a philanthropic viewpoint. How are your organizations really, I think it's not only that meeting the moment, but wanting this moment to really redefine what responsible technology looks like. Ania?
Yeah, I think just even back to that whole idea of funders starting to come together and forming their own collaboratives and coalitions. There are I mean, even in the field of philanthropy, I think money that is going towards tech and tech solutions or tech issues is also probably like in the bottom three things that philanthropy is funding. And even inside of that, most of that money that is going into things related to AI is coming from, kind of the effective altruism sector, the ones that are like in the AI arms race, and have very different sort of incentives and beliefs around what AI can do, and not as thoughtful about what effects it's going to have on society, what it's going to have on jobs, all of these other things. So I think that when we are looking at AI, we're thinking about responsible innovation. We're thinking about what does it look like? Pandora is already out of the box. What does it look like for us to live a healthy future with AI where we're not afraid about what it's going to displace, and instead we're thinking about how does it augment, how does it support, how is it in service to us and not the other way around. And so as a result of that, we've been joining and forming different kinds of funder collaboratives that are focused on AI. One of them we actually have with Kapor. And then there's another one that we're doing that is really about building public AI infrastructure that allows civil society to be able to build on top of things and not only be dependent on proprietary private AI solutions to be able to participate in that AI economy. And then there's also another global collaborative that we're a part of that is also looking at what these effects are and how do we make sure that we're really getting ahead of these emerging issues with technology as well.
Josh, I'm going to skip you for a second because Lily, I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that collaboration that you have going on with Omidyar.
Definitely. I think when we say the word AI, I think it's gone so misused at this moment that tech, software, anything. Oh, it's AI. It's AI enabled, right? We saw how some of the startups were able to fundraise 15 to 20% more just by adding AI at the beginning of the past 2 years. But I think for us, it's really important to make sure that we're demystifying, especially as a foundation, because we are centered on helping our communities. And so the commitment in California specifically to do that, to look at the entire ecosystem and demystify AI, that it's not magic. This is, there's a physical land use, there is energy consumption, there's water consumption, there is the questions of how the data has been captured, how it's also being implemented and actually deployed. And so the importance of having community involvement before this technology is deployed is super critical. And unfortunately, right now, that's the areas that we're not seeing getting funded. And so for us in California, we wanted to make sure that we are looking at it from an ecosystem perspective of how are we helping build world-class education, starting in our classrooms, from making sure that there's not only computer science access, but it's also AI literacy with a critical lens. I don't know how many of you all here saw some of the MIT recent report that came out. The more you use ChatGPT, the lazier your brain gets. Yeah, so we want to make sure that we are staying extremely, extremely critical of it in a good way to make it better. But then also making sure that we are not just getting folks into jobs, we have to rethink that whole experience and actually think about more of helping fund and support the next entrepreneurs, the next innovators, the next scientists that can use it and apply it to improve their communities. And so looking at it from the education to what happens, right? What does the new workforce look like, to also helping support and fund the infrastructure, especially public interest infrastructure that may not be available yet.
Josh?
Yeah, I completely agree with all of that. I think for us, as a foundation that's focused on understanding and shaping the impact of technology on society, I think we've been looking a lot at some frameworks that kind of take this like techno-optimist approach, and we've been looking at it from a techno-pragmatist approach, which I think is really interesting at a tech board conference to really think about, A, can tech solve the problem? If so, okay, what does that look like? And then B, if it's going to be enabled by AI, really centering on kind of two questions and understanding who's going to benefit, but most importantly, who's going to be left behind. Because I think that's the one thing that we've really seen, and building off of some of the research that's coming out, it's been really fascinating. We were just a few weeks ago at the Jobs for the Future conference, and they were showing some research, in particular looking at the impact and optimism around AI in Black communities and how there's a lot of hope for what AI is going to be able to do to be able to kind of transform, whether it's things related to education or workforce, but really just understanding and helping to mitigate some of the harm and bias that could be done when you're not thinking it from a responsible standpoint. And so the work that we've been doing is kind of on the unsexy side of tech, really thinking about how can we support and make sure there's data sets, there's data governance, there's guardrails built in, this underlining infrastructure that's needed to really make sure the responsible and ethical side is at the forefront, as opposed to being focused on the flashy tech product. Because again, if we aren't doing this correctly, we're just going to continue to exacerbate the inequities that have existed for years and years and years, whether we're talking about in education or workforce. And so that for us is really interesting, to look for the research, to show the evidence, to make sure anything that's built is grounded in solid research and evidence to help challenge some of those inequities that exist.
I want to just add one thing on top of what Josh is saying too, which is to say that I think another role that we're also playing is really thinking about how we sort of tell stories and put information out into the public sphere. It's really important to, like in all of our foundations, that we are helping people, especially everyday people, feel like they actually have agency when it comes to technology. And that is like, obviously access is a piece of it, and like being able to use things, but I think also a conversation that we could start about the right to refuse technology as well. And so I think it's just really important when we sort of see these things, especially rolling out of Silicon Valley, it very quickly makes people feel powerless and like they're at the end of receiving something they didn't ask for. And so how we allow people to really understand what agency and what power they have to have a shape and an influence on where these things are going is so key as well.
And I think just one thing that I've been struggling with that's super interesting, going back to even a conference we had focused on AI and Black learners, was how do you balance the optimism and excitement that people have when you're also then deeply in the research and you know the harms that are there. And so I've been struggling in a lot of rooms where everyone's excited, AI is going to be incredible. But I'm like, wait a minute, do you know who's actually building these AI models? What data is it pulling from? And so like, how do you make sure there's a critical voice that's challenging? But I'm not trying to be like negative Nancy all the time, but someone needs to be having that criticality to look at what could happen if we're not looking at the research and evidence there.
That's exactly right.
Definitely, and I would add to that aspect of understanding the global space that we're in, right? Right now, we're seeing, especially on the policy, at the Kapor Foundation, we fund original research, we do grant making, we do policy, as well as investments, direct investments into startups, as well as funds of funds. And what we're seeing, especially on how we can codify a lot of the safe guardrails, we're also seeing the space of like, okay, even if all the policy passed, right? Do we even have the marketplace solutions to help provide those alternatives? So that's a gap, and that's an opportunity that I think is really important, especially for you all as you're thinking, what's the next venture, what you're currently working, how does that help address some of these gaps? Because we need to have these safer alternatives, so then that way we can leverage it and be able to build the futures that we want in a way that is really on our own terms. And I would just share that please challenge the narrative, the dominant narrative that we must build at all costs, that it has to be the biggest model. It's not true. In fact, the more as we start to get the technology emerges, we need more contextual data. We need more experts. We need to make sure that this isn't just for your software engineer, but it's for all of us. We need more of the social scientists to really be part of the product development at this moment. So I would say that we have a key window of opportunity. And so this is my call for you all to, we got the fire under us, and to mobilize and to build together with that, multidisciplined approach.
Knowing we have, founders in the room, startups, etc., what I'd be, what we're really hoping to talk here about is also money, right? So beyond traditional grants, ideally, I'd love to hear from the three of you on what other innovative funding approaches you've seen that are most effective when we're talking about bridging the gap between in tech entrepreneurship and supporting founders from underrepresented communities. So who wants to take that one first?
I love this question, so I'm going to jump in here first. And I'm going to try to build off of what Lily was just saying, which is the importance of building alternatives. I think that also when we see these a company like OpenAI, and it's like the 800-pound gorilla in whenever you're thinking about AI, you're thinking about ChatGPT kind of thing. But there is always room for there to be alternatives. And part of the work that I am not part of, the focus of my work at Omidyar Network is on building alternatives and building ecosystems that can support alternatives that are very much built with a commitment to responsible innovation. And so it really is about like, what are the problems we're trying to solve and how are we trying to do that? I say that because in the work that I do, there's a lot of really important, amazing work that's happening out in the field, a lot of bright lights, a lot of incredible founders, and also a lot of fragmentation, like a lot of everyone operating on their own islands doing incredible things, but not connecting together. And if we actually want to really build a counterweight to what we just inherit from Silicon Valley, like there has to be more coalescing, there has to be more people co-creating, there has to be a together that's moving forward. And so to answer your question, one of my favorite things that I've been very bullish on doing as a funder is creating these kind of community infrastructure type funds that where I see a group of leaders that have common interests or even have identified each other and are trying to organize themselves to create some kind of a solution to what we need in the innovation space. I create these funds to help them organize themselves and collaborate and to sort of take away some of the actual operating expenses of we need to get in a room and have a set of conversations. We need somebody who's going to like put together this analysis for us to then go to a funder and ask for a bigger ask that is much bigger than what any of our individual things are doing. So I'd say that one of my favorite things right now is to create these shared pool of resources for people in the field to organize themselves around.
I would plus one to that because I think, especially on the funder perspective, given everything that's happening, we're getting inbound of so much need across all these different areas as we saw some of the federal funding, some impact also state funding, impact the local funding, and so the challenge really is what are the priorities. And so for us, especially as foundations who focus on technology, we want to make sure that we're also helping build the next future while we can. And I think that puts us in a more challenging position, but at the same time, I think it also helps us think about things a little bit more different. And so I would say that for us, looking at coalition building is super critical. And so as you're working in your communities, being able to think of it again as systems engineering, and I speak it from as also as an engineer and also working in corporate, that we got to think about our the work that we're doing as efficiently as we can, from the unit economics to the impact that we're having, and making sure that we're prioritizing the key goals of like, what is the problem that you're trying to tackle? Is there already a solution out there that perhaps you can build around, or do you really need to build it from scratch? And I think especially on the alternatives for funding, besides funding research, policy, and as I mentioned, some of the funds and founders, I think it's going to be really critical for us as foundations to continue to build these funds and include more of these foundations. Again, if there are regional foundations here, raise your hand. We need you. We need you in this moment to make sure that we're multiplying the funding that we can and making sure that we're de-risking, but also making sure that, especially in the next 2.5 years, who knows what will happen. This is where community, place-based work, it's the most critical work. This is, I think, in our focus in Oakland, California, where we're headquarters. That's where we're also bringing in the artist community, pairing them with Northeastern University, focus on AI, and making sure that we have the community, the culture keepers who are helping also change the narrative, create new opportunities, demystify it in a way that we are empowered to be the builders, designers, owners, and investors, and not just the consumers.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know what to add to all of that. I think just being humble, right? Like, I think for especially the work that we're doing, I think we are very humble, where we're learning from two amazing leaders in the work that you all are doing. And so just thinking about like, how can we incorporate that, contextualize for the work that we're doing, but then also being humble to you all, like actually understanding. So like with our grantees, partners, and entrepreneurs, understanding what are the needs, right? Like, yes, traditional grant making and dollars and capital are super important, but there's so many more opportunities. And I think for us, really trying to transition and shift to move away from just focusing on short-term wins, short-term solutions, and actually focusing on systems change, and knowing that we're not necessarily going to see results when we're trying to shift a system in a year or two, but we're actually making a long-term bet. And so just understanding what that looks like, how to measure that, how to support that, and do that in community and coalition, I think is critical.
Looking at the time, what's one takeaway, one action, clear action that the attendees here can, act on, do, learn from? What's one thing that you recommend?
Well, I think that organizing is the challenge of our time. I think that if we all want to live, though, we're all going to have to figure out how we do more togetherness. So, my call to action to everyone is really to be thinking about the communities and the networks that you're a part of and who is trying to specifically, I mean, because we're here at a tech conference, when we're looking at tech, when we're looking at innovation that's happening, like find your people and start building things together. At least at a minimum, start breaking bread together, start talking about what issues you're interested in, start talking about what solutions you think could exist, especially when you're looking directly around you in the environments, like the physical communities and environments that you're in. I think that's a really, really great place to start.
I'll be quick because I know we're at time. I think if you're a funder or a person that has decision-making power and how to allocate capital, figuring out how you can be riskier in the investments and the support that you're making to really talk about the de-risking of the innovative solutions. Just take risks to be able to support early stage ideas, and hopefully it will turn into catalytic opportunities for entrepreneurs.
I would say build, 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 build. And make sure you find your Ocean's 11. You want to make sure that no one person can have all the skills, right? But this is an opportunity to find that the multidiscipline, and as we said earlier, the systems of systems. I think this is a great opportunity for all of us to be able to build stuff that like the power that we have here in less than 5 minutes now, especially with the vibe coding, you can literally launch your business. So test it out, learn, keep learning, but do it also in community, as Ania mentioned. And then also the de-risking, I think, is going to be really critical because we also need to get out of the prototyping mode to then also continue to build and build. So just build, 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 be curious, and keep learning that technology and do it with purpose.
Perfect. Thank you, Sloss. Thank you, Dion. We'll be around.